Most people go through life assuming their decisions are rational, their behaviors are conscious, and their emotions are appropriate to the moment. But what if I told you that a significant part of how you think, feel, and connect to others is being silently controlled by someone you no longer remember clearly? Not a stranger, not a villain, your younger self. The child who once hid in their room, afraid to speak up. The child who learned to earn love instead of simply receiving it. The child who carried silent wounds that no one ever acknowledged, much less healed. That child is not gone. That child is still inside you, not as a memory, but as a living influence embedded deep in your nervous system, your subconscious mind, and your emotional reactions. That child, though small and long unseen, now pulls the strings of your adult relationships, your deepest fears, your inability to trust, your fear of being left, and even your self-worth. You think you're choosing partners, jobs, and lifestyles based on your adult logic. But more often than not, you're just reenacting old emotional patterns in newer environments. That's the hidden truth of childhood impact. And it's not your fault. No one teaches us this. Society says, move on, get over it, don't dwell in the past, cut. How can you move forward when the past lives inside your body? Your body remembers. Your mind stores everything. Every harsh word, every broken promise, right? Moment where love was withheld, or anger was misdirected at you, or you were told through actions or silence that your feelings didn't matter. That became your script. That script didn't stay in the past. It became the subconscious framework through which you interpret the present. Okay. That's why you panic when someone doesn't reply fast enough. Okay. That's why you feel invisible in crowded rooms. That's why you avoid deep connections, even though you crave them more than anything. It all goes back to how you were wired to survive, not live. Survives a child. And the most tragic part, most people never realize this. They go their entire lives mistaking defense mechanisms for personality traits. They think being a people pleaser is just who they are. They think their fear of abandonment is irrational. They think their inability to say no is a weakness. But it's not. It's a trauma response. It's conditioning. It's your inner child begging for safety in a world that once felt unsafe. And here's the most important truth. Until you see that child, hear that child, and begin to heal that child, you will keep repeating the same patterns, falling into the same relationships, and sabotaging the very things you desire most. Because no amount of logic can fix a wound that was never created in logic. These wounds were born in emotion, in experience, in silence. And that's where they must be met. So let's go there. Let's walk back now to relive the pain, but to understand how that pain shaped you. Because once you understand the why, you gain the power to rewrite the how. When we talk about childhood's invisible control over adult life, the starting point must be emotional programming, the process where your young brain learned how to respond to the world based on what it experienced around it. The most critical period for this is between birth and about age 7, when your brain is exceptionally malleable and primed to soak in the environment like a sponge. During this time, your brain doesn't just memorize facts or names, it records feelings, survival strategies, and beliefs about yourself and others that become the foundation of your identity. For example, if your caregivers were emotionally unavailable or unpredictable, your brain adapted by becoming hyper-vigilant, always on alert, scanning for signs of rejection or danger. This constant alertness then becomes the backdrop of your adult nervous system, making you prone to anxiety, distrust, or the need to control situations. Or, if you experience criticism instead of encouragement, your subconscious formed the belief that you are not good enough, and that self-judgment quietly runs every decision you make to this day. These are not isolated incidents, but are woven into your implicit memory, the part of the brain that operates beneath your conscious awareness. quietly shaping your feelings and behaviors before you even realize it. The result is that many adults fear of abandonment, rejection, failure, or intimacy aren't just adult anxieties, but echoes of unresolved childhood wounds. And these fears manifest themselves in your relationships in ways that are both frustrating and confusing. For instance, you might find yourself repeatedly drawn to partners who are emotionally distant or unavailable, not because you seek pain, but because the familiar pain of childhood feels less threatening than the unknown safety of a new, healthy connection. Or you might sabotage your closest relationships out of fear that they will end, echoing the early loss or inconsistency you experienced. These patterns are sometimes called repetition compulsion, a psychological term coined by Freud to describe how humans unconsciously repeat familiar scenarios in an attempt to master them. The irony is that without conscious intervention, these repeats usually cause more pain, as the original wounds were never truly healed. Your nervous system remembers what your conscious mind may have forgotten. Emotional neglect, even if subtle or unintentional, imprints deeply in your brain's wiring, affecting your ability to regulate emotions, set boundaries, and even trust your own instincts. This is why adult behaviors like overthinking, people-pleasing, or pushing loved ones away are not flaws. They are survival strategies developed by your inner child to protect itself. Understanding this shifts your perspective from blame or frustration to compassion and curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" you begin to ask, "What part of me is still afraid? What is it trying to protect?" This awareness is the doorway to healing, because it transforms your inner narrative from one of judgment to one of care. And it also explains why logic alone often fails to solve deep emotional problems, because issues are not in the mind, but in the nervous system, in the body's implicit memory. This is where practices like mindfulness, somatic therapy, and inner child work come in, helping you connect with the parts of yourself that were unheard and unseen for so long. They teach you to sit with your feelings without judgment, and to gently rewrite the old scripts with new, kinder stories. Healing is never linear, and it often requires patience and repeated practice. But every small step away from old trauma is a victory toward freedom. Freedom from fear, from self-sabotage, from relationships that don't serve you. Because once you begin to recognize how your childhood still pulls your strings, you gain the power to cut those strings. You learn that you can become the conscious adult your younger self needed. And that is not just therapy jargon. That is real transformation waiting for you to claim it. Among the many childhood wounds that silently govern adult lives, the fear of abandonment stands out as one of the most pervasive and painful, rooted deeply in early experiences when a child felt left alone emotionally or physically, whether due to actual separation, neglect, or inconsistent caregiving. This fear becomes a ghost that haunts relationships, leading adults to cling desperately to partners, friends, or even work situations. Not out of love or healthy attachment, but out of terror that if they let go, they will be left utterly alone. Again, sometimes this fear expresses itself in jealousy, possessiveness, or overwhelming anxiety at the thought of being left behind. But at its core lies the primal scream of the child who once cried out for reassurance and received silence. Instead, this often pairs with another wound, fear of rejection, where children who were criticized, missed, or made to feel inherently flawed learn to interpret the world as a place where acceptance is conditional, only given if they perform or behave in certain ways. As adults, these people become perfectionists, overachievers, or people pleasers, always trying to prove their worth, but never quite feeling secure enough to relax and be themselves. Their self-esteem becomes a fragile castle built on the shifting sands of external approval, leaving them vulnerable to deep feelings of inadequacy and loneliness. What's more, these wounds do not simply vanish with age. They migrate beneath the surface masquerading as personality traits, habits, or even strengths. For example, the adult who controls every aspect of their environment may be compensating for the childhood chaos that made unpredictability terrifying. Or the person who avoids intimacy might have learned early on that closeness equaled pain or betrayal. Relationships thus become battlegrounds where old wounds are triggered and reenacted unconsciously, often leading to the very outcomes the wounded child feared most: rejection, abandonment, or neglect. The tragedy is that without awareness, people continue this cycle for decades, unknowingly choosing partners and situations that echo their early pain, hoping for a different ending, but trapped in the same story. Healing begins with recognition that these fears and patterns are not personal failings, but survival responses crafted in the crucible of childhood. When you start to understand that your anxiety about being left is the echo of a little child who once felt invisible, or that your need to please others is a learned strategy to earn love, you can begin to extend compassion toward yourself. This compassion opens the door to self-care and ultimately to change. Techniques like journaling, meditation, therapy, or guided inner child work are tools that can help you listen to those silent parts of yourself and offer the reassurance and nurturing that was missing. This process is not easy sometimes. It feels like peeling back layers of old scars, but it is necessary if you want to live fully and freely, because the truth is, your adult self has the capacity to be the loving parent that your inner child needed but never had. This means setting boundaries, saying no, choosing partners who respect and cherish you, and learning to trust yourself. Again, it means rewriting the old scripts of fear and insecurity with new stories of safety, worthiness, and unconditional love. It's a journey from surviving to thriving, and it all begins with the willingness to look back with kindness and then step forward with courage. One of the most fascinating, yet often misunderstood aspects of how childhood influences adult relationships is the way attachment styles develop early on and silently dictate who we are drawn to and how we behave when we get close to someone. Attachment theory, first developed by psychologist John Bowlby and expanded by Mary Ainsworth, describes 4 primary styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, that reflect how our early interactions with caregivers shape our expectations of love and safety. If your childhood was nurturing and consistent, you likely developed a secure attachment style, which means you're able to trust others, communicate your needs, and feel comfortable with intimacy. For many, childhood was a place of inconsistency. Parents who were sometimes warm and sometimes distant, caregivers who were overwhelmed or unpredictable, which breeds insecure attachments. An anxious attachment style might show up as constant worry about your partner's feelings or excessive need for reassurance, because deep down, you're still trying to prove that you are lovable and worth keeping. Avoidant attachment, on the other hand, emerges when closeness was threatening or overwhelming during childhood. So, as an adult, you might push people away, keep your guard up, or prioritize independence over intimacy. A disorganized attachment is often the most complex, developing in environments where caregivers were sources of both comfort and fear, leading to confusion and difficulty regulating emotions in adult relationships. What's critical to understand is that these attachment styles are not your fault. They are survival strategies encoded in your nervous system to keep you safe when you had little control. And yet, they can cause profound suffering by sabotaging your ability to form secure, fulfilling relationships. The good news, because these patterns are learned, they can also be unlearned. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing your attachment style allows you to stop blaming yourself and begin creating new ways of relating. Therapy, self-reflection, and even relationship education can help you practice new behaviors, such as expressing your needs clearly or tolerating closeness without panic. Moreover, the relationships you choose now have the power to rewire your brain, providing new experiences of safety and trust that your childhood lacked. It's a gradual process that requires patience and self-compassion, but it's the path to freeing yourself from old scripts and stepping into a healthier way of loving and being loved. The adult who once feared abandonment can learn to feel secure. The child who once hid their feelings can learn to be heard. The wounded inner child can finally rest. Childhood trauma and neglect leave marks not only on our hearts, but also on our brains, shaping how we perceive the world and react to stress in ways many people don't fully understand. Scientific studies in neuropsychology show that repeated stress, abuse, or emotional neglect during critical periods of brain development can alter the architecture of key regions like the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex, which are responsible for processing emotions, memory, and decision-making, causing the brain to become wired for survival in a way that often makes it difficult to regulate emotions, focus attention, or trust others. This rewiring creates hypersensitivity to perceived threats and an exaggerated fight, flight, or freeze response even in situations that are safe. Which explains why adults with childhood trauma can feel overwhelmed by relatively minor stressors or misinterpret social cues as rejection or danger. The constant activation of this stress system leads to chronic anxiety, depression, and difficulties in forming healthy relationships. As the brain is stuck in a state of alert, unable to relax or feel secure. On a cellular level, trauma affects the production of stress hormones like cortisol and disrupts neural pathways, which further impacts mood regulation and resilience. Yet, the brain is also remarkably plastic, meaning that with awareness, supportive relationships, and intentional healing practices like therapy, mindfulness, and somatic experiencing, it can gradually rewire itself towards safety and calm. Understanding these biological effects of childhood trauma helps us to replace self-blame with empathy for ourselves and others. Realizing that difficult behaviors or emotional struggles are symptoms of survival, not personal failings. This knowledge becomes a powerful foundation for healing as it encourages us to treat our minds and bodies with patience and care. Seek professional help when needed and create environments both internal and external that foster safety and connection. Ultimately, the goal is not to erase the past, but to reclaim your present and future by learning to live beyond the unconscious programming of trauma, empowering you to create relationships and a life that honor your worth and capacity for love and resilience, healing from childhood wounds and their lasting impacts on your thoughts and relationships begins with the simple yet profound step of awareness, which means noticing when old patterns are running your life without judgment and with curiosity instead. This is the foundation of many therapeutic approaches, from mindfulness to cognitive behavioral therapy, as it empowers you to observe your reactions as signals from your inner child rather than flaws of your adult self. Once you start recognizing triggers, those moments when you feel irrationally anxious, angry, or withdraw, you can begin to differentiate between your past pain and your present reality, giving yourself space to choose a different response. Another powerful tool is inner child work, where you consciously connect with the younger part of yourself through visualization, journaling, or guided meditation, offering compassion, understanding, to validation that may have been missing during your formative years. This process helps to heal emotional wounds by integrating the child's needs into your current life, allowing you to reparent yourself with kindness and safety. Setting boundaries is also critical, as it teaches your nervous system that you are capable of protecting yourself and that your feelings matter. Learning to say no, to walk away from toxic relationships, or to ask for support are acts of reclaiming your power. Therapy, especially trauma-informed approaches, provides a safe container to explore these themes with professional guidance, helping you unpack layers of subconscious programming and build resilience. Additionally, practices such as somatic experiencing and mindfulness reconnect you with your body, where much of trauma is stored, facilitating emotional regulation and grounding. Community and connection play a vital role to finding people who understand and support your healing journey. Creates new relational templates that can rewrite old beliefs of isolation or unworthiness. Remember, healing is nonlinear and requires patience. Setbacks are part of the process, not failure. By committing to this journey, you begin to rewrite your internal scripts, transforming fear into curiosity, pain into growth, and survival into thriving. You empower your adult self to lead with awareness and love, freeing the inner child to finally rest and flourish in safety. Healing from deep. Childhood wounds often involves confronting parts of ourselves that we have hidden away, rejected, or denied. This is the essence of shadow work, a powerful psychological and spiritual practice that invites us to explore the unconscious parts of our personality, including fears, desires, and traits we consider unacceptable or shameful, which were often shaped in response to childhood experiences. By bravely shining light on these shadows, we bring what was once unconscious into awareness, breaking the cycle of repression and allowing healing energy to flow. Shadow work teaches us that these disowned parts are not enemies, but misunderstood aspects of ourselves that need compassion and integration rather than judgment or suppression. Alongside shadow work, mindfulness meditation serves as an invaluable tool. It's training us to observe our thoughts and emotions non-judgmentally in the present moment, which reduces reactivity and cultivates emotional resilience by creating space between stimulus and response. This increased awareness helps us notice when childhood programming is influencing our reactions, so that we can choose responses aligned with our adult values rather than unconscious fear. Emotional regulation strategies such as grounding techniques, breath work, and somatic exercises connect us with our bodies and calm the nervous system, which is often stuck in states of hyperarousal or shutdown due to early trauma. These practices collectively enable us to develop a new relationship with ourselves, one based on curiosity, acceptance, and self-love, replacing old patterns of self-criticism and avoidance. As this healing unfolds, it naturally transforms our relationships, allowing us to establish healthier boundaries, communicate authentically, and experience intimacy without fear. The journey is ongoing and requires patience, courage, and support. But the reward is profound, reclaiming your power, restoring your wholeness, and stepping into a life where you are no longer controlled by your past, but guided by conscious choice and love. Healing from childhood's invisible chains is not a destination, but a lifelong journey of awakening, self-compassion, and transformation. As you continue to uncover the roots of your thoughts, fears, and relationships, remember that every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory over old patterns that once held you captive. This process reshapes your identity, shifting it from someone defined by trauma to someone empowered by awareness and choice. You learn to recognize that the fears that once ruled your life were only signals pointing toward unhealed parts of yourself, not truths about your worth or potential. With each moment of self-kindness, you rewire your brain and calm your nervous system, creating new pathways for safety, love, and connection. Your relationships begin to mirror this inner healing, evolving from cycles of pain and misunderstanding to spaces of trust, authenticity, and joy. The child inside you, who once felt alone, unseen, and unheard, now has a voice, a protector, and a home within you. This transformation is profound because it frees you to live fully present, no longer shadowed by the past, but illuminated by the power of conscious healing. You become the adult your younger self dreamed of, a guardian of your own heart, a beacon of love and resilience. And though the journey can be challenging, this is one of the most rewarding paths you will ever take, for it leads you home to yourself.